What's going on? Peace and power and elevation be to all you beautiful people out there. What's happening? It's your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. So, before I get started, I want to thank everybody that has been subscribed to my channel, like my channel, share my channel, all that great stuff. So, make sure you guys share the video, okay, and share the contents on here. So, today I want to talk about George Washington Williams. Now, it's only necessary because someone on my page brought up his name actually, and I happened to look into the archives, look into information about this man, and how this man got his recognition, right, was through what actually it was John Hope Franklin, who was a historian, written a book about him, written a biography, and that's how his name came into the public eye. Now, if it wasn't for John Hope Franklin, nobody would have known about George Washington Williams. Okay. And still, a lot of people don't know who he is because it's not enough for us digging into our history as we should. We're not looking into information as we should, right? But I just decided today I'm just going to go ahead and speak on this topic and talk about this individual because he has written books dealing with African American history, and he also was a soldier, and he also ran into politics. He did a lot of stuff, all right? You could say that he's a polymath. He was a polymath, so he had multiple skills under his belt. And a lot of our people were polymaths. So I would just want to go ahead and get started. And let's go to the source. So the source that I want to share, of course, one of the first sources is Wikipedia, but I have other multiple sources and also have books to back up as well. So now let's go into who he was. As you can see, that's a picture of him right here, over here into the right corner. Very handsome young man, wasn't he? So handsome. Yeah, that's him. All right, so let's look at his life. So it said he was a soldier in the American Civil War and in Mexico before becoming a Baptist minister, politician, lawyer, journalist, and writer on African American history. So he served in Ohio House of Representatives in the late 1880s. Williams turned his interest to Europe and Africa. So after having been impressed by meeting King Leopold II of Belgium, he traveled in 1890 to the Congo Free State, then owned by the king, to see its development. Shocked by the widespread brutal abuses and slavery imposed on the Congolese, he wrote an open letter to Leopold in 1890 about the suffering of the region's native inhabitants at the hands of the king's agents. This letter, which subsequently popularized the term crimes against humanity. Oh, see? Wait. So he pretty much came up with that term crime against humanity, right? And it was a catalyst for an international outcry against the regime running the Congo, which had caused millions of deaths. All right. So let's look at his life. And that's him again, right here in this picture. Me with the Ohio legislator. Okay. So Williams was born free in 1849 in Bedford Springs, Pennsylvania, to two African Americans, Thomas, a laborer, and Ellen Rouse Williams. The state had abolished slavery after the American Revolution. So the oldest of four children, his brothers were John, Thomas, and Harry Lawson Williams. The boys had limited education for a time. Williams lived in a house of refuge where he learned barbering, considering a skill and advantageous trade at the time. During the American Civil War, Williams ran away to enlist at the age of 14 in the Union Army under an assumed name. He fought during the final battles. And so after the war, Williams went to Mexico, where he was among Americans who joined the Republican Army under the command of General Esperanza, fighting to overthrow Emperor Maximilian. He was commissioned as a lieutenant, learned some Spanish, and earned a reputation as a good gunner. He returned to U.S. in the spring of 1867. So it goes on to talk about his education. So after return to civilian life, the young veteran decided to attend college. He was accepted at Howard University, a historically black college in Washington, D.C., but did not stay long. 1870, Williams began studies at the Newton Theological Institution near Boston, Massachusetts. In 1874, Williams became the first African American to graduate from Newton. So he met Sarah A. Starrett during a visit to Chicago in 1873. They were married the following spring when he graduated from Newton Theological. They had one son together. Now, it goes on to say about his religious and political career. Hello there. Shout out to the chat. What's up? What's going on? I hope all is going well with you. All right, so after graduation, Williams was ordained as a Baptist minister. He held several pastorates, including the historic 12th Baptist Church of Boston. Williams served as the pastorate in Washington, D.C., where while there with support from many of the leaders of his time, such as Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. Williams founded the Commoner, a weekly journal, and Williams published 8 issues. So Williams moved his family to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he continued as a preacher. In addition, he studied law under Alphonso Taft. Reading the law with an established firm, he passed the bar. He became the first African American elected to the Ohio legislature, serving one term from Cincinnati for 1880 to 1881. According to his biographer, historian John Hope Franklin, he offended his constituents by offering a bill that threatened to deny members of a local African Methodist church the right to bury their dead in what was becoming an exclusive suburb of the River City. Although the bill died in committee, William was not re-elected and his state political career abruptly ended. He turned to practicing law. Franklin noted Williams' ability to persist and pick up new endeavors after he had closed off some fields. So we see that the political arena did not work very well for him. Okay. So now let's check this out. And it says, in the last week of his administration, President Chester A. Arthur nominated Williams as minister, resident, and consul general to Haiti and Saint Domingo. Okay. In early 1885, but he was not confirmed as he was not considered qualified. Governor Cleveland, the president elected in 1884, nominated Democrat John E.W. Thompson to the position soon after taking office in 1885. Thompson was confirmed by the Senate. So in 1887, Williams was given an honorary doctorate of law by Simmons College of Kentucky, a historically black college, where he spoke at a commencement ceremony. So in 1888, Thompson was a delegate to the World Conference of Foreign Mission at London. Although he failed to gain entry as a delegate to an anti-slave trade conference in Brussels in the spring of 1889, he made other arrangements to visit the city and the continent. So now going down to where it talks about he became a historian. So it says Williams' most substantial achievement was as a historian. He wrote groundbreaking histories about African American in the United States, the history of the Negro race in America, 1619 to 1880, which was published in 1882. It is considered to be the first overall history of African Americans, showing their participation and contribution to the earliest days of the colonies. Here, Williams used the term crime against humanity in his reflection about the immorality of slavery in the United States, which was one of the earliest usage of the term in its modern sense. All right. So, in addition, he wrote a history of United States colored troops and African American participation in the American Civil War, a history of Negro troops in the War of Rebellion. All right. So, traveled to Europe and Africa. So in 1889, William arranged to go to Europe to write articles as a representative of S.S. McClure's Associated Literary Press. He was granted an informal interview with King Leopold II of Belgium, with whom he was initially very impressed. He became interested in traveling in the Congo Free State, which the king personally owned, and discussed his interest in developing. Williams got additional support from the President Benjamin Harrison administration and traveled to the Congo in 1890. He was appalled at what he found, as the king employed a private militia to enforce rubber production by the Congolese. Williams found evidence to support the widespread rumors of harsh abuses against workers and their families that had resulted in a state of near slavery for many families. Physical mutilation of workers who could not meet production goals, and a high rate of deaths. And here it is, go down. It says the king and his supporters tried to discredit William, but he continued to speak out about the abuses in the Congo Free State, helping to generate action in Belgium and the international community. Eventually, the Belgian government took over supervising the Congo Free State and tried to improve treatment of the Congolese. So he passed away. While traveling back from Africa, he became ill in Cairo and traveled back to London with his fiancée Alice Fryer, as he was living separate from his wife. Williams died in Blackpool, England on August 2nd, 1891 from tuberculosis and pleurisy. He is buried in Leighton Cemetery, Blackpool. In 1975, a tombstone was placed at his grave by an American historian and local supporters, commemorating William as an Afro-American historian. All right. So, before I continue on, now here it is, a black man who traveled to the Congos to meet the King Leopold of Belgium. And what did he discover? By his surprise, he discovered that there was harsh treatment of the Congolese people. He thought that they were in slavery. And he continued to be vocal about it. And because of the fact that he was so vocal, it took the Belgian government to step in and to interfere and to make correction and changes that was going on, because he refused to stop talking about it. He kept it going. He kept it going. He said, I'm going to speak on this. I'm going to be vocal about this. I will not be quiet. And that's exactly what he did. Now that take courage. That's a powerful voice right there. So this man became ill after traveling from Congo and trying to get back home to the United States. And he ended up going to England. And that's where he died. That was his final resting place. Now, tuberculosis was a very common disease during that time. If you had tuberculosis, you had to pretty much quarantine. You had to quarantine, you had to stay away from people. You could not be in an environment with everyone else. That disease was very infectious and it's still infectious today. Now, you don't hear much about tuberculosis like that anymore because it's not a very common disease that people have. But if you do, you have to stay away from a person like that because it's a respiratory disease. Exactly, that's what it is. I've been to Mount Vernon and I'm from Washington, D.C. Oh, that's cool. That's great. What's up, Lion Times, baby? What's up? What's up? All right, so let's go ahead and look at the letters that he wrote. All right, so here's the letter. Then we're going to go over the books that he has written. All right, so Appendix 1. An open letter to His Serene Majesty Leopold II, King of Belgians and Sovereign of the Independent State of Congo by Colonel the Honorable G.O.W. Williams of the United States of America. Now remember, he was a former military soldier, okay? So let's go ahead and let's look at it. Had to zoom that up. Good and great friend, I have the honor to submit your majesty consideration some reflection respecting the independent state of Congo. Based upon a careful study and inspection of the country and character of the personal government you have established upon the African continent, in order that you may know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, I implore your most gracious permission to address you without restraint and with the frankness of a man who feels that he has a duty to perform to history, humanity, civilization, and to the supreme being who is himself the King of Kings. And he goes on to say, Your Majesty will testify to my affection for your person and friendship for your African state, of which you have had ample practical proofs for nearly 6 years. My friendship and service for the state of Congo were inspired by and based upon your publicly declared motives and aim in your personal statement to your humble subscriber. Humane statements and work of Christian civilization for Africa. Thus, I was led to regard your enterprise as the rising of the star of hope for the dark continent. So long the habitation of cruelties, and I journeyed in its light and labor in its hope. All the praiseful things I have spoken and written of the Congo country, state, and sovereign was inspired by the firm belief that your government was built upon the enduring foundation of truth, liberty, humanity, and justice. It afforded me great pleasure to avail myself to the opportunity afforded me last year of visiting your state in Africa, and how thoroughly I have been disenchanted, disappointed, and disheartened. It is now my painful duty to make known to your majesty in plain but respectful language every charge which I am about to bring against your majesty's personal government in the Congo has been carefully investigated. A list of competent and vicarious witnesses, documents, letters, official records, and data have been faithfully prepared, which will be deposited with Her Britannic Majesty's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. Until such time as international commission can be created with power to send for person and papers to administer oaths and attest the truth or falsity of these charges. I crave your majesty indulgence while I make a few preliminary remarks before entering upon the specification and charges. Your majesty, title to the territory of the state of Congo is badly clouded, while many of the treaties made with the natives by the Association International du Congo, of which you were director and banker, were tainted by frauds of the grossest character. The world may not be surprised to learn that your flag floats over territories to which your majesty has no legal or just claim, since other European powers have doubtful claims to the territory which they occupy upon the African continent. But all honest people will be shocked to know by what Govelin means this fraud was consummated. Now check this out. This man, you might think, oh, he got some balls. He got some balls to do this. Oh, yes, he got some balls to do this. And as you can see, he writes perfectly. And he sounds like an elocutionist. The way that he spoke in that letter. Very well articulated and very respectful, and used his words carefully. But at the same time, he was checking him. He basically, let me put it into translation. This is what he basically saying. I gave you a lot of praise. I respected you. But when I came over there, I seen a lot of stuff that was so disgusting and disappointing. Now I look at you differently and see that you ain't what you really say you was about. You approached me. You came to me, and I obliged by your request. So I obliged by your request. I came over there thinking that there was going to be great things going on, and come to find out it was something totally opposite. So this is like a smoking mirror to me, and something got to change. And that was his attitude. That's basically what he was saying. You was with the fuck shit. That's what he was saying, basically. You was with the fuck shit. You got a lot of fuck shit going on right now, and I ain't feeling it. Elocutionist. All right, so elocutionist, right? Or elocutionist, however you want to say it, elocutionist or elocutionist, is someone who is a powerful speaker, eloquent speaker, a great orator, a person who can speak well, very well articulated. Okay, so however you want to say, if you want to say elocutionist or elocutionist, that's on you. Everybody have a different pronunciation of the word. So that's what the word elocutionist is. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna put it in there. Okay, so I typed the word in there. So for those of you that are not familiar with that term, there you go. All right, that's what is an elocutionist. So an elocutionist is someone who's a very powerful speaker, who's very strong in articulating, who can be able to speak in public, who can be able to convey a message, and who has great pronunciation, great grammar, etc. Okay, so I was given a compliment about the letter. Okay, see, you see that letter? So I mean, it's a lot that goes into this. I'm not going to read all of it, but just to give you the idea of what the brother was talking about. As a matter of fact, you know what? I want to read this part right here. There were instances in which Mr. Henry M. Stanley sent one white man with 4 of the 5 Zanzibar soldiers to make treaties with native chiefs. The staple argument was that the white man's heart had grown sick of the wars and rumors of war between one chief and another, between one village and another, that the white man was at peace with his black brother and desired to confederate all African tribes for the general defense and public welfare. So it says all the sleight of hand tricks had been carefully rehearsed, and he was now ready for his work. A number of electric batteries had been purchased in London, and when attached to the arm under the coats, communicated with a band or ribbon which passed over the palm of the white brother's hand. And it says, and when he gave the black brother a cordial grasp of the hand, the black brother was greatly surprised to find his white brother was so strong that he nearly knocked him off his feet and giving him the hand of fellowship. All right, so now you see where he talks about electric batteries. So the Congo was known, it is known for its coal, right? It's coal mine. So all the stuff that you have in your electronic devices, like your batteries for your cell phone, the devices for the computer, your iPads, any electronic you have, that comes from the Congo. That's the natural resource. Okay, so without that natural resources, you will not have all these electronic devices. So these Congolese people, until this day, go into the area and dig for coals, dig for all the material that is needed to make these devices, and for these companies like Samsung and Sony and all these other places, they rely on the Congos. Okay, and remember, Africa is the richest continent in the world, the richest continent. And the reason why Africa is the richest continent is because it's natural resources. So I just want to put that out there. Let me see the name of the book. It's an open, okay, this is called An Open Letter to His Serene Majesty Leopold II. So the name of it is The Open Letter to Majesty Leopold II. And it's a letter. It's not a book, Lion. It's a letter. So now I'm going to get to the actual book in a moment. All right, so if you ever want to know where the term crime against humanity come from, that came from him. So it was George Washington Williams that was one of the first to use the term crime against humanity. In other words, it's inhumane, violation of human rights. That's basically what he was talking about, violation of human rights. So he was one of the first. He was the first person that came up with that term, crime against humanity. Okay. So, and the reason why he used that term was because of what he witnessed in the Congo. And it was dissatisfying and was disheartening. All right, so now let's go to the books. Now let's look at the book called A History of the Negro Troops in the War of Rebellion. All right, now you can find this book on Google. All right, you can download it for free on Google. All right, so you can read it for free. Again, look at that handsome young man right there. He looks so very handsome. There he go right there. Okay. All right, so chapter 1 deals with the introductory Negro soldiers in ancient time, right? And Negro soldier in modern times. The antecedent facts foreshadow events. Military redemption of slave. All right, so let's look at the military redemption of slaves. All right, so let's go down here. What says military redemption of slaves. At first, let's zoom that up. At first, the faintest imitation that Negroes should be employed as soldiers in the Union Army was met with derision. By many, it was regarded as a joke. The idea of arming the ex-slaves seems ridiculous to most civil and military officers. From the period of the introduction of this people into the British colonies in North America down to the breaking out of the rebellion in the South, they had been subjected to a most rigorous system of bondage to the white race. Transport from his wild African home, the barbarian without language, tradition, memorials, or monuments was kept in a lowly condition of servitude. Every lesson of obedience was enforced and illustrated by the lash. He was fenced in by the laws, met by force at every point. His whole existence was a struggle with force in nature and in man. Eventually, the wild, free, and impetuous spirit of the African became pliable, docile, and submissive. And then he goes on to say the first generation of Africans in America were more tractable than their fathers, having been reduced to chattels by a code of laws enacted by the white race, which claimed that it was Christian charity to enslave the African under the influence of civilization rather than leave him to barbarism. He was to keep in his state. The slave code pre-support the natural and native spirit, the aptitude and intelligence of the slave. It was not enough that he was bound with chains because he was less to be feared physically than mentally. In his abject ignorance, his enslaver thought they should find security. That portion of the slave code which denied the Negro slave facility and privilege of learning was a compliment to his natural ability to acquire knowledge. And it goes on to say the Negro slave was excluded by law from printing offices, libraries, drugstores, and from all places and employments where a knowledge of letters and figures was required. He was seductively kept in ignorance from the first until ignorance had almost become a second nature to him. He was reduced to a machine, calm in apparent contentment, follow resistance and unrest. The affection once so instinct would light scarcely quivered with emotion at the sound of the auctioneer's voice or the the crack of the whip. Only the sharp cry of the slave mother whose vimishing child was torn from her withered bosom, or the deep sobs of the wife separated from her husband indicate that a nerve of sensation and segment of affection was yet alive. They were calloused and hardened by cruel blows and barbarous treatment, but they were not dead. They needed only the salve of human sympathy and kindness to call them into action. Now, that's pretty deep, right? So at one point in time, they didn't want ex-slaves to fight in the wars because they figured that they were not intelligent enough and they were not as apprehensive enough to be in the front line. But eventually they did because it was promised to the slaves that if you fight, you will earn your freedom. And then some feel like if you fight, then you would get some resources. That was the way to trick a lot of them, right? But not everybody earned resources and not everybody earned their freedom. But let's go ahead and all right, and let's check this out again. It's called A History of Negro Troops in the War of Rebellion. Now let me look at chapter 1. Before I go to the next source, real quick. History of Negro troops in the rebellion, in the War of the Rebellion, right? So, Negro soldier in ancient time. Check this out. The Negro appears in the military history of Egypt for the first time in the inscription of Una, who was crown bearer or secretary of state under King Pepi during the sixth dynasty. Down to this time, the Egyptian empire had enjoyed comparative quiet. But the sixth dynasty clearly marks the beginning of the military epoch. A large army had always been in existence in Egypt, but it was seldom called into the field. The military class always ranked high, coming next in order to the priesthood, and was divided into two distinct parts. Herodotus estimates the strength of the Egyptian army at 410,000. On average, of 5 persons to a family, his figures would bring the army class up to 2,050,000. But Diodorus places the strength of the army at 692,000. So what he's doing is giving an account of the blacks during the time in ancient period, and especially in ancient Egypt, and how many soldiers were fighting and all. So going ahead down, skipping down to this paragraph, it says the population of Egypt 300 BC was about 7,500,000. I mean 7,500,000. 7,500,000. That will equal to 7.5 million. The army went on war footing was about one fourth the population, but after it was recruited, the archers or infantry were disbanded and sent into agricultural districts. So he's giving an account of the ancient Negroes or ancient black people during that time in Egypt. Now, Egypt was spoken a lot when it came to black history during that period of time, because Egypt is considered as the civilization of Africa, like Greek and Rome was to Europe. Okay. So Egypt was considered to be the most prosperous nation in Africa. All right, so that's why many people gravitate towards its history, because its history is a little bit more rich and it's more easier to research on than learn about the history of the monuments and the historical sites in West Africa, Central West Africa, because it's not as detailed as the history of ancient Egypt. But even with ancient Egyptian history, there's only a small portion of it that people know, and there's more to discover. All right. All right, so let me go ahead and show y'all this last book here, and then I'm about to call it a night, or call it an evening rather. So this one here is called The History of the Negro Race in America. Woo! All right. Now, this is from 1619 to 1880. Negroes as slave, as soldier, and as citizen. So as you can see, part 1, preliminary consideration, right? The unity of mankind, chapter 1. Chapter 2, the Negro in the light of philology, ethology, ethology, and Egyptology. All right, chapter 3, primitive Negro civilization. Chapter 4, the Negro Kingdoms of Africa. And then, as you can see, Benin, Dahomey, and Yoruba. Chapter 5, the Asante Empire. Then he goes on to chapter 6, the Negro type, etc. So, not to go through all these chapters, but just to give you the concept, the idea. All right, so as you can see, he wrote about the colony of Georgia. Ooh, that's interesting. All right, so that's the table of continent, and there's part 2 and part 3 as well. Okay, so preliminary consideration. All right. So now let's go down to where they talk about the unity of mankind. Check this out. The biblical argument, one race and one language, one blood, the curse of Canaan. During the last half All right. Let me start again because the connection went out. So during the last half century, many writers on ethnology, anthropology, and slavery had strenuously striven to place the Negro outside of the human family. And the discipline of these teachers have endeavored to justify their views by most dehumanizing treatment of the Negro. But fortunately for the Negro and for humanity at large, we live now in an epoch when race, malice, and sectional hate are disappearing beneath the horizon of a brighter and better future. The Negro in America is free. He is now an acknowledged factor in the affairs of the continent, and no community, state, or government in this period of the world's history can afford to be indifferent to his moral, social, intellectual, or political well-being. At least that's what he thought. Anyways, it is proposed in the first place to call the attention to the absurd charge that Negro does not belong to the human family. Happily, there are a few left upon the face of the earth who still maintain this belief. In the first chapter of the book of Genesis, it is clearly stated that God created man, male and female created he them, and that the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and beneath into his nostril the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And that Lord God took the man and put him into Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So, but let's skip on down. All right, so in this chapter, he's talking more about the Bible, and he's using biblical reference. All right, so let's go to chapter 2. Now it says, Cush and Ethiopians, white and black, Negro characteristic, the dark continent, and the antiquity of the Negro, indisputable evidence, the military and social condition of Negroes, cause of color, the term Ethiopian. So there seems to be a great deal of ignorance and confusion in the use of the word Negro, and about as much trouble attends the proper classification of the inhabitants of Africa. In the preceding chapter, we endure to prove not that Ham and Canaan were the progenitors of the Negro races, for that is admitted by the most consistent enemies of the blacks, but that the human race is one, and that Noah's curse was not a divine prophecy. And then he goes on to say the term Negro seems to be applied chiefly to the dark and woolly haired people who inhabit in Western Africa, but the Negro is to be found also in Eastern Africa. Zanaros says Chus is the person from the Kujians are derived. They are the same people as the Ethiopians. This view is corroborated by Josephus, Apuleius, and Eusebius. The Hebrew term Cush is translated Ethiopia by the Septuagint and Vulgate, and by almost all other versions, ancient and modern, as well as by the English version. Or again, he used some biblical reference here. But then he goes down to talk about the conclusion is patent. The words Ethiopian Kush were always used to describe a black people or the country where such a people live. The term Negro from the Latin Niger and the French Noir means black, and consequently is a modern term with our original meaning of Kush in Ethiopia with a single exception. We call attention above to the fact that all Ethiopians were not of the pure Negro type, but were nevertheless a branch of the original Hamitic family from whence sprang all the dark races. The term Negro is now used to designate the people who, in addition to their dark complexion, have curly or woolly hair. It is in this connection that we shall use the term in this work. Now, let's go down to chapter 3. The primitive Negro civilization. All right, so down here it says the Negro tribes of Africa are as widely separated by mental, moral, physical, and social quality as the Irish, Hunts, Copts, and Druids are. Their location on the dark continent, their surroundings, and the amount of light that has come to them from the outside world are the thermometer of their civilization. It is as manifestly improper to call all African Negroes as to let me try again. It is as manifestly improper to call all African Negroes as to call American Indians. It says the Negro nation of Africa differ widely as to their manner of life and their characters, both of mind and body, in different parts of that continent. Accordingly, as they have existed under different morals and physical condition, foreign culture, though not of a high degree, has been introduced among the population of some regions, while from others it has been shut out by almost impenetrable barriers beyond which the Aboriginal people remain secluded amid their mountains and forests in a state of extensive existing, a state from which history informs us that human races have hardly emerged until moved by some impulse from without. And then he goes further to say neither Phoenicians nor Roman culture seem to have penetrated into Africa beyond the Atlantic region and the desert. The activity and enthusiasm of propagators of Islam have reached further. In the fertile low countries beyond the Sahara, watered by rivers which descend northward from the central highlands, Africa has contained for centuries several Negroes empires originally founded by the Mohammedans. The Negroes of this part of Africa are people of a very different description from the black pagan nations further towards the south. They have adopted many of the arts of civilized society and have subjected themselves to governments and political institutions. Okay? They practice agriculture and have learned the necessary and even some of the ornamental arts of life and dwell in towns of considerable extent, many of which are said to contain 10,000 and even 30,000 inhabitants, a circumstance which implies a considerable advancement in industry and the resources of subsistence. All right, but then skip down. He says, but in our examination of African tribes, we shall not confine ourselves to that class of people known as Negroes, but call attention to other tribes as well. And while in this country, all persons with a visible admixture of Negro blood in them are considered Negro, it is technically incorrect. For the real Negro was not the sole subject sold into slavery. Very many of the noblest types of mankind in Africa have through the uncertainties of war found their way to horrors of the Middle Passage and finally to the rice and cotton fields of the Carolinas and Virginias. So improper in speaking of the race in this country in subsequent chapter, I shall refer to them as people of color or Negroes. All right, so I'm not going to go any further, but that is giving the outline about the history of the Negroes. So as you can see in this book, right, he used some biblical references. And now you may argue that, well, that is pretty pseudo, some of the stuff that he's talking about. Yeah, it might be pseudo because at that time period, there was only limited information that was available. Okay, there was only limited information that was available. So he only used what he was able to gain access to. Okay, and people thought that the Bible was a very reliable source. So a lot of people didn't have the necessary tools like we do today, where we can now go on encyclopedias, we can go to the libraries, we can look at the DNA data, we can take DNA tests. They didn't have that back then. And as you can see, he was on point with a lot of stuff too. He was on point about West Africa, right? He was on point on certain things, but there were certain things that was based on some misunderstanding. Peace to Brother Gullah. How you doing? How you doing, Brother Gullah? I hope all goes well with you. But yeah, there was some misunderstanding as far as the information is concerned because only limited source that he had available. All right. But you guys can look him up. If you guys want to read his materials, all you have to do is go on Google, right? And you can read it for free and you can download it, okay? Because his books are outdated, unfortunately. So you can go download it for free and you can read it for yourself, all right? But you can see that this man was very passionate and he was a true historian, okay, of his time. And also, he was passionate about the people in the Congo area, and he felt that the Congolese people should not have been mistreated or placed in a condition where they're not getting they're dealing with malnutrition and they're dealing with sickness. So he made it his concerning effort to write the letter to King Leopold to let him know this is inhumane. This is wrong and this is unethical and something got to be done. All right. So anyways, that's all I have for today, for this evening, and I thank you guys for rocking with me. I appreciate y'all so much. Shout out to the people in the chat and shout out to those that's been subscribed to my channel, share my channel, watching my videos, share my videos, commentaries and all. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who feel like I've been an inspiration to you guys to keep on pursuing and keep on going with the information that you guys are trying to present, I really appreciate it. I thank you for that because my whole goal is to bring about inspiration to people and inspire people to do more research or look into more things and read up more materials and share information to others who may not know or may not be aware of these things. So our ancestors, they may not be here. They may not be here, but guess what? We cannot let the information die. We cannot let the scholarship die. We cannot let the things that they have accomplished die. So we gotta do the best that we can to preserve those info as much as possible. Because they may not be here, but their work is still here. Their legacy is still here. And it's only fair that we as the people preserve those legacy and preserve those work and share those work to others. All right. So with that being said, y'all, that's all I have for today. Y'all take it easy on yourself. Until next time, I'll keep you guys posted on new videos, etc. So y'all be safe and peace. Thank you so much. All right. Y'all have a good one.